Hello, Peter. Thank you. Ugh.
So, Michael, watching that reel reminded me that you and I have had encounters over many years in different situations. Like the first time that I had our encounter, I considered it a total disaster for me because I was this hotshot young executive at Paramount, and I'd put together a Paul Newman deal and a Warren Beatty deal and a Robert Redford deal, but I got this great idea. Michael Douglas, a brilliant young television actor, Streets of Samson. If we could make a deal for him to produce and star in movies, and that you would like that idea. So I pick up the trades the next day, and as usual, you were 2 steps ahead of me because you just sewed up the rights to Cuckoos Nest. And somehow you've done the one thing that I would scare the shit out of me. You persuaded this ferocious producer named Kirk Douglas that you are going to produce it instead of him. And I always wondered, how did you begin that conversation with Kirk Douglas?
Well, a conversation that goes on to this day, I might add. My father had a great acting career, but it was also one hell of a producer and produced a lot of things, and actually had a 5-picture contract with Stanley Kubrick at one time, which lasted until Kirk brought in Stanley Kubrick on Spartacus. And although Stanley Kubrick never acknowledged that picture that he actually directed, he came in, but he said, I'll do this if I can get out of my contract for any other pictures. And so he did, even though he did Paths of Glory before. Mm-hmm. But in my father's production company, he had a guy named Eddie Lewis, a very capable guy, who found Cuckoo's Nest in galley form, Ken Kesey's first novel, and was in galley form, optioned it, and had it made into a play. And he went back right at the height of his career, 1960. Spartacus had just come out, and so a lot of Hollywood actors have gone back. But he went, right at the epitome of his film career, went back for 6 months to do Cuckoo's Nest, this play. And it wasn't received necessarily great. It was a little ahead of its time, I think. People didn't quite know what to make of it. And his idea was to do the play. It was going to be a success, and then move into doing a feature film. But he did the run on Broadway. He came back. He was struggling to get it made. Meanwhile, I'm in college, University of California at Santa Barbara. I'm taking 20th century American Lit, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is now a contemporary classic novel. And I read it, and, it was the 60s, and it was the big chief, it was a psychedelic symbol in the book, and this and that, but I loved it. I get out of college, I begin my career. Dad has been trying for a number of years to get Cuckoo's Nest made as a movie, and he decides to sell it. He's going to sell the rights and all that. I just jumped in, and I said, I love this book. I love this. Let me have a chance to set it up, to get you to play the part of the actor, and we can produce this together. And my father, and I really very grateful at times, says, let the kid run with it. I've tried for 5 or 6 years, he's never going to get it. And so I then went back through his files, and I looked to see who had expressed interest over the years, and I found this company up in Berkeley, Fantasy Records, led by Saul Zaentz. It was a jazz label who made their money with Creedence Clearwater Revival, and now I'm up doing the streets of San Francisco.
The ultimate hippie mogul.
The ultimate hippie mogul. And then I was up in San Francisco doing Streets of San Francisco. Berkeley was right across the bridge. And we started working on it. Now, that part is all fine. Now, when it came time for who was going to play R.P. McMurphy, right, this was a little more difficult. And my father has never really, somehow he's forgotten that directors really make the final decisions about casting. But somehow, I become this poster boy. And he looks at me and says, it was one of my best parts I ever had. And I didn't get to play it. And I said, Dad, it it was 15 years later, careers had changed, you were in your 60s, and yeah. And of course, he's forgiven. He was so happy how the picture turned out. Was acknowledged Jack Nicholson, what a great job that Jack had done. But he never forgets. He never forgets. Once a week, yeah. That was a part of my career.
Yeah.
Now, we did share the producing back end, and I would say, Dad, you made more from that movie in the back end than any film you've ever done in your career, as half of mine. So let's just calm down here. Yeah.
So the funny thing is, now, I thought of Cuckoo's Nest, but most folks out here, when people would say, you're going to be talking with Michael Douglas, let's talk about Kaminsky. So then it was all about TV actors wanted to be feature actors. But now, in the world of streaming, feature actors want to be TV actors. But how did you get involved in Kaminsky? It's such a wonderful leap.
Thank you. My agents sent this over to me. I wasn't thinking about getting into sort of television, but they sent me over this this Chuck Lorre script. And for you who don't know Chuck Lorre, I mean, he's sort of the godfather of half-hour comedy, going back to Sybil, Darman, Greg, Two and a Half Men.
King of sitcom.
Huh?
The king of sitcom.
The king of sitcom. Big Bang Theory, Young Sheldon.
Right.
And these are all what they call four-camera shows that are shot with an audience in front. And Chuck wanted to do something different. He wanted to do what's called a one-camera show, which is like a movie. And he just sent me the script to take a look at it. I read it, and I said, this is really good writing. This is really good writing. Forget about television versus feature films. And one of the things that already happened, even though Chuck is a big success in a long time, is that a lot of writers in feature films are going into television, because as writers they can also be producers, and it's more beneficial, and also they become the showrunners on some of these shows. So I just read it and I thought it was great, and then we talked about someone to play my cohort's part, and Chuck thought about Alan Arkin, who I never met before. I didn't know Alan at all. And I thought, yeah, he'd be good. And then Chuck got back to me and said, Alan wants to meet you first. I said, okay, all right. So we met each other. I guess Alan was kind of checking me out, looking me over. You know, I'm a relatively easygoing guy because I'm a producer. So as a producer, when I'm acting, I'm always looking out for the production. I'm always looking out, make sure everybody else is comfortable and happy. Sometimes this is why I don't like to produce and act at the same time, is acting is being selfish. Acting allows you just to look at that person in front of you. Everybody asks you, okay, yeah, I'm fine, I feel good. You sure, can I get you anything? No, I'm fine, thank you. And you just, in front of it, producing, you know, you have to have a 360-degree vision of everything that's going on. So most productions like me because I'm kind of looking out for the production. And I've learned from a long time ago, from when I was doing television series work, I want everybody to be good. Everybody. I don't want to compete, you know, or try to, people are actually put other actors down or all that. I know that if everybody's good, the show's good, and we'll all benefit.
But I had heard a rumor that you had two demands. First, that you would be an executive producer, and second, you would have final cut over the number of prostate jokes.
No. I should have, though. I should have probably made that decision. No, I think the executive producer part of it comes into basically when they're setting caps on actors' salaries.
Aha.
And the way they get around the caps on stars in these shows is they make him an executive producer. Right. And let me just tell you, with Chuck Lorre, I did nothing. I mean, he runs the whole ship. But I think that's probably how that all came about.
Well, listen, I'd love to talk to you about women for a few minutes. Because in looking at the sizzle reel, I was reminded, and I made notes about the people, that you worked in that middle period of your career with the most ferocious group of co-stars in the history of the movie industry. Demi Moore, Kathleen Turner, Jane Fonda, Sharon Stone, and of course, Ms. Deming. And it's often in those films, and follow me because I may miss the point, often in those films, you were somewhat the victim. The women were the aggressors, and particularly in a movie like Disclosure. I was wondering, like today, in a Me Too era, could films of that sort be made? And would those roles work for you?
Oof, that's a good big question. I don't know if I have a whole answer for both halves. Could those pictures be made today? I would hope so. They're about great women, very successful women, very, very smart women. But the problem we had, even, I'm going to go back to Cuckoo's Nest, with the big nurse. Women did not want to play the villain.
Right.
Actors, male actors, always want to play the villain. That's the best part. You know, you get to act of everything. When we were casting Cuckoo's Nest, all these actresses turned the part of Nurse Ratched down. Right. I mean, and I'm telling you, I mean, I remember Anne Bancroft killing her husband one day at a party, whacking him the side of the head. You told me not to do that thing, Bart, you know, and all that. And we had 5 actresses, very well-known actresses, turn that part down before Louise Fletcher was fortunate to get the part. And,
it was so great.
And get an Oscar.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
The times have changed.
Times have changed, but I was intrigued by the War of the Sexes and the challenge, you know.
No.
Saying that those were all really good women's roles, you
Right.
know, and was a big part of their careers.
So I'd like to stay with Annette Bening. So you were the president, and she, as I recall vaguely, was a lobbyist.
Correct.
And you were, interestingly enough, about to start a second term, I think. So there are sort of analogies of today, except that as the president, you were sort of a good-natured, maybe a little bland, and she was a very spirited, again, ferocious woman. As the president now, when you were great in that movie, does that change the way you view what's going on today? To the way the bombastic presidency of the moment, would you have played that role different, do you think?
I mean, today?
Yeah.
If it called for it, but no, that was, I mean, I love that character. I mean, I love that the control and the vision. I mean, I don't think it was never a question about adjusting for the times. It was that script that was there.
Aaron Sorkin.
Aaron Sorkin, right, who wrote West Wing, after the American President. Marty Sheen, who played my chief of staff in the movie, then he became president in West Wing. Michael J. Fox was in the one too. You know, it's hard to keep up, Peter, with the political correctness that's going on, and I've always liked to be a slam fighter, to mix it up. I like to be in people's faces. I like to create some controversy. I'm fascinated about the gray area characters, people, you know, who have a little larceny in them, but they try to do the right thing, you know, most of the time. On Disclosure, you mentioned, I'm surprised that we have not taken more heat for the reversal of roles of having a woman boss who's harassing a man underneath it. That has not come up. Thank goodness. I hope not after this session here.
Time for a remake, perhaps.
Ooh, I don't know, Peter. You produce, okay.
But of the presidents, of the candidates today, the people vying for presidency, in some ways, the person who most resembles your persona at that time is Michael Bloomberg.
Well, who's my candidate?
He is your cat.
I will share with all of you down here, and please don't, I apologize for this political message in this way where everybody's got very strong opinions, including my brother. But Joel, I want to. I know Michael Bloomberg personally. I've known him for a number of years, and I think the time just to bring all of us, back together a little closer, find out what our common, rather what our differences are, what our similarities are. He was an unbelievable, one of the top mayors of New York City in his 3 terms. Done an amazing amount of work with the climate control, gun control. People complain about, well, he's so rich. He's given so much money into so many charitable groups that I think he makes an excellent, excellent choice for our future. Thank you.
Now, do I vaguely remember? I remember you once told me that Jacques Chirac met you at some functions.
But this is a great story.
Yeah, tell about that.
Well, this is so in The American President. We have a White House dinner scene for the French Prime Minister in the movie, right? And about 6 months after the movie's over, I get an envelope from the White House, and I open it up, and it's an invitation from President Clinton to invite me to the White House in honor of President Chirac, who was the president. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. This is really pretty thoughtful. So I went to the White House, and many of you I'm sure have been there before. And as you go through this receiving line, where you go past the receiving line, and in this case, President and Mrs. Clinton and President Chirac and Mrs. Chirac are in line. And as I'm walking up to go into the line, I see President Clinton whispering something to Chirac, and he goes, Michael. He said, yeah, Michael, come here. And he tells me, come here, you come up here. And he puts me up next to President Chirac. And then President Clinton got in line, and he walked up to me and said, hello, Mr. President, And I got this series of photographs, and, they're not going anywhere, let me just tell you.
I love it. So, Michael, watching Cameron this morning, recall a few, not that many years ago, a few years ago, your friend, mine, Jacques Nicholson, came to me and said, my daughter is a student at Brown, and she doesn't have the remotest idea what it's like to be an actor. Would you come to me to Brown, and you and me will talk about it, and maybe we can make her understand what I do for a living. And of course, the trouble with Jack Nicholson is that the minute he got before the students, he got on his favorite subject, namely to lecture about the importance of the creative use of marijuana in acting. So he delivered this passion, but he also said some very affecting things. I wondered, did you ever have that experience with Cameron, where you went to one of the places that he was at in school and talked about what you did?
Did I go to one of his rehab centers?
Exactly.
And
were you welcome there?
Well, I was welcome there. I mean, he was so good about it. It's always a little, tough when you go in where everybody else knows who your father is and knows your whole relationship and knows everything else. It's always a little tough. But they were always respectful as far as the rehab. And also, I also learned very quickly the difference between make-believe movies and the real world. By the way, I don't know where Cameron is. I thought he did a really nice job. And Jamie, thank you so much. The really the amount of homework that you did, the research on all the books was really appreciative. Thank you.
Absolutely, that's true.
No, I thought you were saying as far as learning about acting, Jack Nicholson, probably more than any actor I know, is actually more open in front of the camera than he is in real life. And I can remember some of the stuff on some of the scenes in Cuckoos Nest. I'm thinking about when they were escaping, and he's waiting, he's sitting there, and just to watch this guy, he uses the camera as an excuse for being open. Whereas in real life, he's a little shyer and probably a little more protected.
Right.
Also, he's very good. The other lesson I learned, and it's really changed now with digital, but with film and takes and editing, he always reaches way out and tries exaggerated takes that may not work at all, but he knows it's okay because they're just takes, they're edits. And especially now with streaming services where you don't have to anymore, write down take one to the thing and you can run through 5, 6, 7 takes one after another and do it very well. But I learned a lot from Jack early on.
He's a brilliant actor and an eccentric man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But again, that picture made his career. I mean, that was the new Nicholson, and it was extraordinary. So, do you miss the epoch when you could make issue pictures? I mean, have always been a politically active and thoughtful person, but you made several pictures like the China Syndrome and so forth, where it did take a point of view, and you were on the road and talked about the pictures. Again, those pictures aren't made anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered whether you would encourage young producers, and again, to use the streaming services, there's more room on the streaming service to do pictures of this subject. Do you see that coming back now in the brave new world of streaming?
Well, I do. I mean, I do. I wouldn't even think about doing an issue picture in films anymore at all. I would think much more in chance of streaming that you're able to get a number of pictures. But I'm going to ask you something, Peter, which is, I think, studios, how we know it, is a thing of the past.
Yes.
Studios, I mean, it really is a phenomenon that these major studios who've been running for almost 100 years, and, it was our form, sort of vertically integrated, have just been raped and pillaged by Silicon Valley, who's come down here. And these companies with all the smart people in them didn't know what happened to them. They came down here, they took the best executives from every studio, offered them triple their salaries, have put together teams. They're just phenomenal. I mean, they have budgets. I'm just dealing with Netflix. Netflix each year, just for original material and for licensing, not for the cost of their company, just for acquisitions and material, spend $15 billion. Whoa. $15 billion. So now we're saying it's a big potpourri, and there's Apple in here and Amazon. It's true than Facebook. But the truth is there's only 2 companies, Netflix and Disney Plus, that is their core business. These other, trillion-dollar companies, I guess, Amazon, this is not their home business. So I don't know if they're going to actually succeed in the very end. You've got issues with Warner Brothers and Universal, who I think are going to have to probably join forces in terms of trying to compete because they don't have a platform. But I'd love to hear what your feeling is about the studios as we know them.
Well, that's interesting because the film studios that you and I first transcended, that was a great moment because studios could, like Paramount in that epoch in the 70s, get behind. When I first got there, I was lucky enough to get involved in The Godfather, Rosemary's Baby, and Goodbye Columbus, and Chinatown. And the studio wanted to make pictures of that sort. They were considered commercial movies. The Godfather cost $7 million, as you know. Together, you wouldn't cover craft services for $7 million were the picture to be remade. But it's funny because you and I once talked about this subject on a television show, and we're having a very serious conversation about the future of movies and where that was going. And we're on live television on NBC. And in the middle of the discussion, I heard a phone ring, and Michael said, "You never look askance." But at this moment, you said, "Oh shit, that's my phone. I forgot to turn it off." And I said, "Well, answer it." So we're on television, and you answer the phone, and you say, it's Catherine. She's calling from Tokyo. So it was the only time I was ever on television when you and I and Catherine had a three-way conversation about the future of the studio system.
That's right.
Actually, you were talking also then about Catherine, about the fact that being married to an actress is infinitely a better idea than being married to a normal human being, because they understand the nightmares and the ups and downs. And we talked a bit with her on the phone, and it was very funny and a bit bizarre. But I appreciate your comment on that because, you know, all of us have been through different relationships, but she's a wonderful professional. She understands.
She does, and which is also the reason why you see so many married couples of actors together, because they understand each other's issues. Sometimes in your marriages where one of the parties is not in the business, they can get jealous or they can misinterpret things. You got to be pretty solid in your marriage when you're scheming with Sharon Stone, you know, or somebody else.
Yeah.
Honey, somebody's got to do it. I mean, it's just, I mean, it's a job, you know.
That's right. Well, I think that also the whole issue of ups and downs, I think it's really incomprehensible for a normal human being to understand what it's like to go through a cycle of pictures that all connect, and then the phone doesn't ring. I mean, that's an unimaginable situation to explain to someone. But that's in your career. You've had moments there where everything was working 100%.
Right.
And I'm sure you've had moments where you wondered, boy, I better try something that Cameron is on.
Right, right.
But
I think where I really benefit, Peter, is from the very beginning of my career, even when I was still in college, you know, and I was not an actor, didn't know what I was going to do, and then I was in college, and it was in my junior year, and they called me to the office and said, you got to declare a major. You're in your third year of college, you know, and it was the 60s in Santa Barbara, and I was a hippie, and I don't know, man, I don't know. So I started acting, you know, a bit. But in the summertime, I used to work back at a place called the Eugene O'Neill Memorial Theater in Waterford, Connecticut, that had something called a National Playwrights Conference. And every summer, they would do this conference for playwrights, and the actors served there to sort of for the writers to work on their playwriting. You were really a tool of the playwright, the writer. And that is where I really learned, you know, that if it's not me as an actor, there's 10 other people that can do it, because everything is about the structure. That foundation, that script, that structure, and getting it right. That's what makes that's the crux of what makes a good movie. And then if you're able to complement it with the right casting, with the right director, but the core has been really the core is what's so strong, and that sort of has stuck with me throughout my career. So I was less worried about me having a good part as I was being in good movies.
right.
And so my track record is pretty good about, you know, not necessarily grand slam home runs, but successful films because the scripts were good. And I always...
And you read them.
Yeah.
Unlike many actors.
True.
Like Marlon Brando always boasted about the fact that he never wasted his time, as he would say, reading those fucking scripts.
Right.
And he really, Marlon Brando, on the other hand, I always felt didn't really like acting. And
Well,
I always felt that you understood acting and you engaged by it.
Well, I was so jealous of people like Jack or Marlon who found acting effortless. They had no appreciation for it, as opposed to many of us who were working our asses off. I remember Jack was doing Marlon Brando lived next door to Jack, and they were sort of friends and never worked together. And then they had a picture called Missouri Breaks.
Yes.
And Jack was so excited he was going to work with Marlon. But Marlon said, you know, I can't remember my lines. So, and he'd write his lines on little pieces of paper and put them here, and he put it on Jack's forehead like this. And so Jack was so excited, and he was going to do a scene acting with Marlon. And Marlon just looked at his, he was so good at it, looked at his collar, and he read his line there. He looked up at the sky, he had his line written up there. And Jack, all he wanted to do was act with Marlon. Marlon never looked at him.
Right.
Marlon just looking at this.
Yeah, that's such a good point. On The Godfather, Brando's lines were behind the camera.
Right.
So he read it. I actually, being a stupid young executive, went up to him and said, Marlon, you know those lines, don't you? Do you just do it because it slows things down and it makes you the center of attention? So he growled at me and he said, get lost, kid. I thought that was a suitable response. But talking about going to the East reminded me that from the first time I met you, it's very clear you are an Eastern person. You're not, everybody assumes, well, Kirk and all that you're a Californian, but in your sensibilities are very much Eastern. And I remember I knew your stepfather, Bill Dad was a terrific guy.
Great guy.
But it's strange to go through life when people have a completely different conception of you than who you are.
Well, I mean, this goes hand in hand, Peter, with what's called Hollywood royalty.
Yeah.
Hollywood royalty, Joel and I, grew up and we went out in their marriage. They went out for 1 year, Kirk and my mother, Diana. Joel was like 2, I think I was like 5. And they lasted about 1 year. He was out there. He liked everything he saw, And my mother said, I think this is it. So we went back east, and we grew up in New York City, and then she remarried in Connecticut. But Hollywood royalty, we started off. They lived in a one-room apartment in New York. They were as young actors. They went out to California. They separated when he was just getting his first movie done. And then we lived in a very middle class environment, very happy about it, on an apartment in the backside on the west side, and then moving up to a small farmhouse in Connecticut. So they throw around these terms, and all I remember is a very hardworking young father who was a Jewish from Belarus immigrant, was born here in 1916. The year after they moved here, and did not see a lot of royalty until a little further into the career.
Yeah, but he mastered the studio system. I remember when I again first started in the film business, that a lot of the actors of Kirk's generation, Burt Lancaster, Gregory Peck, they all had deals, as you well remember, at the studios, and the studios would find them the perfect material and the right director to team them with, and they were dependent to a degree on that structure. And I remember being shocked that some of these great stars of the past would come to see me, say, do you have any scripts for me? Because nobody's developing nothing for me anymore. Yeah. The exception was Kirk Douglas. So I felt that the transformation energized him to all the reading that he had done, and he wrote a few novels, I recall, that he wouldn't be thrown by this transition. He'd start his own production company.
He did. He was one of the first people to have his own production company and outside. But it reminds me, because it was such a tight group back then, Burt Lancaster and that. And I remember Burt saying, Kirk could be the first one to tell you how difficult he is to work with. Yeah. And I'd be the second.
That's right.
So it was,
but they were great characters, and some of them were very smart.
Yeah.
Like Burt Lancaster, indeed, was very smart, and really did reshape his career. On the other hand, some of the statesmen of the business, like Gregory Peck, were totally thrown by the transition and couldn't quite figure out how to shape their new careers and their new lives. It was an interesting moment in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And now we face today, of course, with streaming, where the stars are again important for a whole different reason. They're important because in the calculus of Netflix, they say, aha, I've got Bobby De Niro, so we're going to have a certain number of subscribers in Western Europe who are going to sign up. So the whole thinking is different, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's very different. I mean, I benefited. I look back the streets of San Francisco, which I did 50 years ago. That series was syndicated around the world.
Yeah.
So even before I got into movies, it was this television show which gave everybody sort of an awareness of who I was. And I remember my first award in Germany, and I was there, and I got this award, and I went up to say thank you all, thank you so much for this award. And I could see the audience going, "Was ist das? What is it?" And it turned out you have, voices. You have other languages which you have been dubbed in voices. And I had this this deep bravado German voice, this actor, and I sounded like a wuss when I came in real life, and they were ready for a serious, guy. And now Netflix, we have 40 voices, 40 different languages.
Wow.
It's turned into, but I think it helped me a lot getting out there 50 years ago.
Well, are you going to do, now that you've put your foot into it in such an amazing way in Kaminsky, are you going to do more shows of this sort? Are you going to become more active in the great world of streaming?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'm talking more producing. I always go, back and forth. My agent saying I don't want to produce anymore and get rid of the company, but I can see having a small production company, especially the areas of documentaries would interest me a lot, and also those smaller psychologically driven pieces that I used to like to do. I could see streaming being a much better opportunity.
Yeah, it is. So I'm sure most of the folks out there are thinking, the good news about Netflix and all that is that there's such a great opportunity of things to watch. On the other hand, how the hell do you know what to watch? How do you find out what's interesting? I mean, I think all of us are lost in this great sea of
They have something
content.
new every day. They have, I mean, every day they put up something new. I don't know how. I mean, I know people find them. I guess
That's why even the lexicon of the business is disturbing to me, because it's now referred to not as a film or a satire. It's referred to as content.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the word content. It sort of suggests an anonymity of product, which to a degree does exist.
Yeah.
But in terms of content, you have such a great sense of comedy. I'd love to see the serious Michael Douglas, the jocular Michael Douglas,
Right.
as a contrast to your persona, because you love to get laughs.
I
And you
love
always
to get
have. And you
laughs.
wasn't good. Danny DeVito, a good friend of yours.
Danny's a good friend of mine. No, I don't understand. I mean, one of the reasons why I did Kaminsky was to learn more about comedy. I mean, I think we are so disrespectful to our comedians. They never get nominated for Best Actor awards. Comedy is so much more difficult than drama.
Yeah.
I mean, don't we all appreciate our funny friend? I mean, we got enough serious friends, right? We all love that guy who's a friend who makes us laugh and everything. For me, I got my brother Jojo, who always makes me laugh. And so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do the Kaminsky, was to sort of learn about pacing and double takes and reactions and that was sort of a new area. The same thing now with this Marvel film's Ant-Man. I never did any of this.
I loved you for doing that.
Well, I never did any of this
yeah.
green screen stuff before, And then they make you younger.
Yeah.
My God, it's like, this is good stuff. This is really good stuff.
Well, Michael, I admire the fact that you are really a great adventurer in the world of content, of the media, that you've had such great times. And when you are an adventurer in the media, you are working without a net.
Right.
And you've always brought it off brilliantly, and it's a delight to talk to you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you.